I'm going to tell a story about an old friend, a dear friend who I really miss and I haven't talked to in 8 or 9 years. So yeah, this is a story about my good friend Alex. Little background about Alex. He was I was 23 or 4 at the time, and he was around, I believe he just turned 50, or he was 49, about to turn 50. He was a hermit, alone in the woods, for about 25 years, I think he said. And you could tell by the way that man talked, by the way he conceptualized things about our world. And he was very spiritual. I would even consider him my spiritual guru or teacher or mentor, really is the best word for it. He opened my eyes to many different ideas about the world, about reality, just through simple conversation, simple dialogue. It was sort of like Plato and his philosophical process of using dialogue to awaken deep or latent ideas about reality inside of an individual. I think that's kind of the best way. It's one of my only wishes is that you watching right now and I could actually have a back and forth dialogue live. But at some point I plan to go live once I can activate it through YouTube. But for now, I invite you to comment down below. And most importantly, I'm trying to grow this channel to make it a community for a lot of people to come and gather and share ideas in the comments. I would love for you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you just get just an ounce of something that makes you feel good or you enjoy from this video or any one of my other videos. So without further ado, the story is called A Recovering Hermit. This is the story of Alex, a self-proclaimed recovering hermit who had lived alone in the Adirondack Mountains in Maine before he moved west to Colorado. He had done many things while living reclusively. He was a carpenter, a sailor, and a spirit junkie, as he termed it. He had a book collection that was nothing to scoff at, and lived humbly in a cabin-esque space lit by oil lamps and a fireplace. I first met Alex when my friend Rob and I decided to move high up into the foothills just west of Boulder, Colorado. We were about 7,500 feet above sea level, tucked in a canyon on a winding road leading up into the Rocky Mountains. We were surrounded by wilderness. It was something I had always wanted to do. In true mountain man fashion, I grew my hair out, grew my beard out, and embraced this new home and lifestyle. We got a 2-bedroom cottage-style dwelling with a fireplace in the living room. This was the main source of heat for our entire home. We got a cord of wood upon move-in and got to chopping, stacking, and storing it from the elements. It was January 2014, so we still had a few months of winter to get through. The difficult thing about the specific property we were on was due to its position up against a steep rocky incline. The low-lying winter sun never touched the property through much of the winter. We shared a driveway with another larger house and a smaller cabin, which I would find out later was where Alex lived. In the large house were a couple college-age kids who wanted the same thing that I did, to live in the mountains and get the experience of what it was like to go a bit off the grid. I believe there are a lot of people who long for this type of existence. There's something innately human about it. I had moved up there a bit unprepared, but I'm always, and always have been, a trial by fire kind of person. Throw me into a situation, let me adapt. Otherwise, what's the fun? It was a 35-minute trek down into town, descending about 2,000 feet along the way, winding down the mountain. As you would imagine, this made for a difficult drive for a vehicle without four-wheel drive. I had a coupe at the time, but some pretty serious snow tires. I made it up and down the mountain pretty effortlessly, despite it being mostly a dirt road. The canyon was inhabited enough for the county to send snowplows up and down as soon as a winter storm hit. One night I was heading down into town after it snowed pretty heavily. Most of the driveways up this canyon road were bridges that crossed over a winding stream that flowed just parallel to the road all the way down into Boulder. It was really a beautiful place to live. This also created some problems in the winter. The bridges became icy faster, and our driveway bridge was a pretty significant incline to get from our parking area up to the winding road. My attempts were fruitless, and out of the dimly lit shared driveway area came a figure. If I recall, it was blizzarding that night, and that's why I couldn't get out originally. And one of the floodlights lit up the driveway just enough to see this figure approaching. It was Alex. A true mountain man, outfitted with rugged, self-made snow gear and a dialect all to his own. It was a mix of several Northeastern American inflections alongside his quirky lingual subtleties that had come from living so many years alone. He saw I was stuck and offered some tips and a helping hand. In no more than 5 minutes, I was out of the driveway and onto the canyon road to begin my journey down into town. We talked for a bit and exchanged pleasantries. We were there to help each other as members of this mountain community. I remember I brought my hands together in a prayer or a mudra and bowed to thank him for his help. It just kind of came over me and he reciprocated. It was odd to do something like that where a handshake would have typically sufficed. One thing I will say about mountain communities is that they're filled with like-minded people who want to be away from the hustle and bustle and who want a sense of tight-knit community that is lost in most of our suburban areas today. That was my first encounter with Alex, and because we shared a driveway, I would see him a lot more during my stay in the mountains. I'm not quite sure when the next time I saw him was, but in one of the next few encounters, he asked me the question, "So are you a spirit head?" And although it's kind of an odd term, I knew exactly what he meant by that. I told him there was some aspects of spirituality that intrigued me, and since moving to Boulder, I had been exposed to quite a bit all at once. It's a tough thing to live a life totally surrounded by the material and the mundane, only to move and to be subjected to all kinds of new outlooks on our worldly existence all at once. Spirituality, at that point in time to me, was like a drug. Every other interest I had, besides music, took a backseat to explore everything from more esoteric facets of religion, the occult, abstract thinking, psychonautic experiences, sleep studies, philosophy, dream studies, yoga, meditation, depth psychology, and channeled texts, among many, many other things. There wasn't a thing on earth that completely took me over like these types of subjects. And if I remember correctly, the rush of all of these things at once, it was like I couldn't read enough books, I couldn't watch enough documentaries, and it was just a fascinating time for me. So when Alex asked me that question, it was something lit up inside of me, and I knew that we would have an incredible bond over this type of thing, and due to his age and just his general aura, I knew that he would be my mentor in some type of way. From that point on is why I still consider Alex to be one of the main influences on my spiritual growth. He offered insights into these subjects and more in such a way that with every conversation I would have my own flashes of insight and wisdom hitting me from every direction. As winter slowed down a bit, the sun finally hit our shared property on February 13th. Alex said it would happen on that day, as it does every single year. He paid close attention to the land like ancient civilizations paid close attention to the stars. Through spring that year, I would occasionally go to Alex's cabin to talk in the evenings. If I'm being honest, I was probably over there every single weekend and 1 or 2 times during the week. We would smoke pipe tobacco, drink organic wine, and talk for several hours. And that was the one thing he always insisted on, the alcohol being organic, local. The red wines were sulfite-free or sulfate-free, and occasionally we would do a 4-pack of organic ciders, hard ciders, from a place not too far away from Boulder. I think it was called Hatchet. I don't know if they're still around. Hatchet cider. Amazing. Those conversations were something I will always hold dear to me. We covered interpersonal growth, spirituality, our mutual preference for being alone, and sharing the wisdom that we had each acquired from our time on Earth so far. Our mountain homes shared paths that led high up into the mountains for some of the best hiking available in this area. Occasionally, my friend Rob and I would trek up into the unknown behind our house and encounter Alex sitting alone under a tree, whittling some wood and smoking tobacco. Alex had been alone for 25 years prior to these events, and his demeanor told us that he was truly in his element. This is what he lived for. He thrived in seclusion, and it is what truly made him happy. We spotted each other in the wilderness and talked for a few moments each time that happened. We shared some laughs, talked about animal sightings, and would usually make a plan to trek across the driveway that evening to meet up, break bread, and chat for a few hours. Sometimes I would walk over to his cabin, or he would come over to my place and we'd sit on the front porch. The porch was right alongside a stream that cut through both of our properties. Always flowing, always relaxing. It had some small trout and other little fish that would always be fuel for conversation. The handmade, solid maple pipes would come out and we would pack bowl after bowl of fresh, organically grown pipe tobacco. The subtle buzz and the mental boost from the nicotine often made for pretty intense conversation. Alex always termed it a mind meld, which I got a kick out of, but I never really understood or realized that he was always referring to Star Trek. I always enjoyed the mind melds, as they were truly profound conversations on topics that were new and fascinating to me. As spring shifted to summer, I would engage in outdoor projects alongside Alex. We dammed the creek in a few places in front of the house to create pools of cool, natural water for the hotter days approaching. Living high up in the Rocky Mountains in winter was an incredible experience, but spring and summertime had their own magic about them. The winds that blew around the canyon carried smells of pine, flowers, and a unique arid dirt smell that I've only experienced in Colorado. We were surrounded by old mining towns and camps. The holes in the mountains and old mining equipment scattered throughout the canyon inspired so many questions. Who was there before us? How many people walked these same paths we did today? The area was rich with wildlife and history. It was an awe-inspiring place to live. Alex and I talked almost every weekend from January to August that year. I stayed in touch with him when I moved back down into a town called Gun Barrel, about 10 minutes northeast of Boulder. When my music career picked up, my contact with Alex slowed down. I remember him saying he was thinking about moving back east to Maine or Connecticut to be closer to his father, who was getting old. Alex never had a cell phone and occasionally emailed with his old desktop computer and the internet that was wired to his small cabin from the larger house on the property. He didn't use it much, but it was a good means to keep in contact. After another 2 years, I'd moved from Colorado, and my contact with Alex just sort of ended. It's sad to think about. A person who can open your eyes to so much more of what life has to offer. Big ideas and concepts, only to fall by the wayside so easily. Since we stopped talking, I've emailed Alex a number of times and attempted to reconnect even for a phone call or two, but with no success. Wherever he is now, I wish him the absolute best. Alex, eternal thanks to you for the insight and the wisdom that you shared with me. That's a tough story for me to tell, just because, to be honest, I don't know if he's dead or alive, and that's a real kind of reality of the situation. And nor do I have any mutual friends to get a hold of him. I know his full name, and I know that he's somewhere in the Connecticut area, if I remember correctly, but it's been a long time. And the point of this story, and why I wanted to share it on my channel, was to hopefully for you to enjoy and understand that Friends, especially dear friends, are people worth keeping in touch with, no matter what happens in life. And especially if these people inspire something within you and helped you grow in some way, shape, or form. The best thing you can do to honor them and to honor yourself and to honor the bond that you have is to keep it going, keep that flame lit. Don't ever lose contact with people you love and people you hold close, because the sting of losing a good, dear friend is sometimes a bit too overwhelming. So with that, if you guys enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed reading it and writing it, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. It's much appreciated, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks.